California Regional Water Quality Control Board, Central Valley Region. I am Carl Longley, Chair of the Central Valley Water Board, and I'll introduce the other board members in just 1 minute. This is the fourth meeting that we are conducting during the COVID-19 emergency. In order to comply with public gathering limitations and physical distancing requirements, and as authorized by the governor's executive orders, there is no physical meeting room. For people who only want to listen or watch the meeting, the board's customary webcast is available. In addition, we are receiving presentations and public comment through a Zoom meeting platform. If you intend to present or comment or think you might be interested in commenting, you should already be in the Zoom meeting room using the meeting ID provided on the board's website and the password you received from our staff. If you've not already received a password, you can email us now at, the address is agenda5@waterboards.ca.gov. That email address is the word agenda followed by the number 5 with no space, at the at symbol, then the word waterboards, then .ca.gov. Include speaker comment. Include the 2 words speaker comment in the subject line so that we can follow up with you. For those in the Zoom meeting, you'll be on mute and your camera turned off until it is your turn to speak. Our meeting host, Gene Coughlin from our IT team, will then unmute you and ask you to turn on your camera if you have one. When you have finished speaking and the board members have completed asking questions, you will be placed on mute and your camera will be turned off. We appreciate your patience and understanding during this extraordinary time. I'll now introduce other board members as follows. And you can go ahead and raise your hand. Carmen Ramirez of Atwater. Denise Cadera of Allensworth. Raji Barr of Bakersfield. Mark Bradford of Sacramento. And I am Carl Longley of Fresno. And I might point out that we're all in our respective homes, and like you, we are dealing with this other way of holding a meeting. State Board Member Tam Dudek is participating in this meeting and will give an update to the board a little later. I'll now introduce the Executive Officer who will introduce his staff.
Morning, Chair Longley, members of the board. We've got a number of staff on the phone today. A few I want to make sure that we acknowledge is the Assistant Executive Officers in our Rancho Cordova, Fresno, and Redding offices, who include Assistant Executive Officer J.J. Baum in Rancho Cordova, Assistant Executive Officer Adam Lapitz in Rancho Cordova, Assistant Executive Officer Clay Rogers in Fresno, and Assistant Executive Officer Clint Snyder from the Redding office. We also have from the Office of Chief Counsel, Senior Attorney Jessica Yar, Attorney David Lancaster, and Attorney Bailey Toft Dupuis, and Head of our Admin Unit, Kelly Garver as well. Janelle Brown will be helping out with some of the meeting administration today. And we also have folks from the IT unit, Bob Chow and Jean will both be helping out to manage all the technical issues that come with a Zoom meeting today. So much thanks to all of them for facilitating the meeting today. And I will turn it back to you, Chair Longley.
Thank you very much. Roger, could you please lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. Please stand. Stand and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any board member communications?
So, Carl, I think we have to unfortunately pause for just a minute here. Apparently the Cali PA video feed is not working. That's where we are broadcasting our meetings for folks who are not signed into the Zoom call. So we'll have to pause for just a few to make sure that that Cali PA feed gets up and running. It has been the weak link, so let's see if we can get that fixed as we move forward.
It's 9:07. I'm going to say we'll be back at 9:10. Call a short recess. Give me the opportunity to go get my coffee.
Guys, it is working actually. I'm able to verify it.
Let's just give a few minutes.
Dr. Longley still needs his coffee.
So you know, it is working, Patrick.
Dean, this is Clay Rogers. Hey, I'm getting emails from a couple people, and basically what it says, they're unable to watch the meeting because the link provided in the agenda says that the meeting is not currently active.
You're
I
right.
just forwarded you an email that
I got it, Clay. It's the EPA link for this. Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing.
Let me get a hold of them.
just wanted to make you aware.
Oh, I see David Lancaster has joined us.
So it appears that they used the agenda from the 2019 October meeting, not the 2020 October meeting. That's why it's not working.
They're not back up yet? Are they, are they still trying to get it up, or what's the?
Yeah, it is not up.
Okay. I hear a chicken someplace.
Rooster.
Rooster.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Goodness.
So should we go ahead, if it's not up?
Actually, we have to have that up to conduct our business.
Okay.
that's the feed that's managed out of Cali, PA. Unfortunately.
How do you get to that page?
To the video link.
Yeah, I'm on the web page on the state board web page. I don't see any link to it there.
If you go to,
I posted it in the chat, Carl.
Okay.
Okay.
For anyone else, it's available on our website. If you go to our website and go to our agenda for this month, there's a link for how to watch our meeting. And if you click on there, it'll take you to it.
Ah, so very true. I've only seen it a million times, come to think of it.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out how to get this fixed. It looks like they accidentally used the agenda from the 2019 board meeting.
That is amazing, to be honest with you.
I'm concerned that they're not going to start the feed until 4 o'clock because that's when the time said it would start.
Yeah. Obviously, there has to be some way to override that.
They're working on it. We just gotta. Looks like JJ is in touch with them currently. We'll see if we can get that fixed. For future board meetings, we may go straight through the Zoom platform. I know it's not ideal from Cali PA standpoint, but I know each and every meeting that we've had that Cali PA has been the weak link.
That's interesting.
Their system was designed a number of years ago, just for what it's worth. And so we have to actually put our feed through a translator device, pipe it downtown, and then they rebroadcast it. And that's why there tends to be a lot of issues with that. It's a closed system that was developed many years ago, and it's still analog. So the Zoom platform has a lot of advantages to that. So I think to the extent we can, we'll see if we can go straight for everybody on the Zoom platform and see if we can get that functionality up and running next go around. So I certainly don't want to waste your time, and if
yeah, I'm thinking about the folks that on the line and came in to see something.
Yeah.
To hear an item or whatever.
Patrick, I'm just wondering if it's worth or even possible to put a message on our webpage, recognizing that the link doesn't work and that we're working to fix it. I don't know how much time that would take.
Yeah, I I was actually looking into that right now. I'm not sure we can get that up and running right away.
Shows that they don't look at what they put up because they had the agenda up. It was definitely October 10th of last year. For everybody's benefit behind the scenes, we're working out a way to see if we can get a redirect on the state water Cali PA web page that would direct them to the regional board's Zoom meeting. Or looks like they finally got it up.
It has been corrected now, Patrick.
Okay.
We are good to go.
And they've got the no, they still have the old agenda up there.
That's on the AGP site, which we're not part of. So if they go to the Cali PA broadcast page, it will give them the correct link now. Maybe refresh your page.
No, that's working.
There is no agenda posted there. Yeah, I'm watching it from the Cali PA site, Bob. So I believe we are good to go.
So real quick though, when you click on the Cali PA site and you go to video, all right, now it's working.
Right. It wasn't before.
Gotcha.
Sorry for the confusion.
Alrighty.
idea how that gets redirected. We'll find out.
All right. With that, we are good to resume.
Okay. So we'll go to agenda item number 2. We're back in session. Are there any board members with communications?
Carl, I attended a couple of calls last month. One to discuss the E. coli issue in the lower American River with some of the advocates for that resource. And that was pretty productive, I thought. And then the next day, I guess, we had a call with the task force on mining to discuss the ongoing remediation strategy for, what was it, the Bully Hill and the Rising Star mine up on Lake Shasta. That was it for me.
Thank you. And I was in both of those meetings with Mark. And additionally, I've been in a couple of CV Salt's XCOM meetings and the regional board chairs meeting, which is always exciting. We went over the agenda for WQCC, which is later this month, and I hope you all can make it. It's going to be virtual like this. Does somebody have, Patrick, do you have the dates for that? I can't bring my calendar up right now.
Yes, the dates are the 26th and 27th.
Right, 26th and 27th. I hope you all can make that. It's a good opportunity to catch up on a number of items that the boards are dealing with and hear about.
I'm sorry, my apologies. 27th and 28th. 27th and 28th.
27th and 28th. And also deal with what kind of issues they're dealing with, which are strikingly similar to the ones we deal with. So, any other board members? If not,
Yes, Pat. No, I have one, Dr. Longley. On September 12th, I participated in a Community Voices on Local, Regional, and Statewide Water Management panel discussion for the 2020 Rural Community Leadership Institute. And there was a discussion. I was on the panel to talk about the importance of serving on a board, and they wanted to know about the appointment and election process and any tips for serving. Talked about personal experiences in serving on a respective board. There was discussion on why you chose to serve, and to share some challenges and successes on the respective boards. Some of the questions that they raised as part of the panel discussion: how to diversify water management at all levels, and why participate in water management and planning. And the key things were the disadvantaged communities, 81 disadvantaged communities in the GMSAs in Tulare County, and why they are not involved. There are 344 disadvantaged communities in the area. Only 21% participate, and of that, only 14% are on a list to compete for funding. So this was an opportunity for me to share with people that are in the Leadership Institute how they can get involved, the role they play, how important, and the issues related to water, and how they can get involved and participate in it. And I thought it was a fruitful exercise. The moderator was Maria Herrera out of the governor's office.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Longley?
Yes.
I also took part in an appointments workshop on September 9th. And same as Denise had mentioned, it was regarding the appointments process and why it's important for folks to serve. The workshop was led by the appointment secretary, Catherine Rivera Hernandez. And it talked about Central Valley folks and the importance of being on boards and what we can bring to the table and about being that voice for communities that are often underserved, such as rural communities. And it was a great workshop, and it was really well attended, and it was virtual, which I think is sometimes a benefit for a lot of folks because they're able to log on and learn a lot of things. And I think it was really productive. And the goal was to make sure that everyone gets a voice at the table. And I was hopeful that after having that panel discussion with a lot of folks, they realized that they can really make a difference by getting involved. So, and we talked about the water board and kind of everything it entails. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other board member communication? If not, we'll move on to agenda item 3, the State Water Board Liaison Update. And I'd like to call upon State Board Member Tam Dudek to give an update to the board and apologize for our tardiness.
Not at all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board and staff. You've already mentioned the WQCC. I will just add that I too look forward to hopefully seeing all of you there virtually. My understanding of the agenda, at least the tentative agenda, is we'll be focusing on 2 issues. One, which we touched upon, I think, before the meeting began, in terms of how COVID has just changed the way we operate as an organization via, the Zoom meeting, for example, and what some of those changes might mean to us, in the future. Then on the second day, I think the focus will be on the racial equity framework and the various programs that are being undertaken under that umbrella throughout the various water board organizations. So I think that will be also a very fascinating discussion. And then we'll have the usual check-ins with the Chief Counsel, Cali, PA, and folks from the governor's office. And one of the things that I hope will come up at WQCC, even though it's not on the agenda, when we have that discussion with agency and folks from the administration, will be the second thing that I wanted to report to you, which was that the governor recently signed an executive order on biodiversity. And I thought it was a really, really good first step. And what that means, to the water boards, in addition to obviously all the resources agencies that will be involved in the biodiversity collaborative, in terms of meeting that 30 by 2030 goal, which is, I think it was like preserving at least 30% of lands and coastal waters by the year 2030. What does that mean? How are we to be engaged in that, given our various responsibilities? And so I look forward to learning a little bit more from the administration in terms of, and from Secretary Blumenfeld too, in terms of what the vision is and how we, the water boards, might contribute to that. And then the only other thing that I will mention, since you're running a little bit later today, is a personal, I guess, priority of mine for over 10 years has been the toxicity provisions that State Water Board staff has been working on. And I'm so happy to announce that we actually have a notice board consideration date, and that is December 1st. If all goes well, that will be when the State Water Board will take up the proposed provisions and consider it for adoption. We've had a series of drafts, a series of public meetings, a series of public comment period. The final draft proposed toxicity provisions from staff will be released by October 30th, so by the end of this month. There'll be that additional 1 month before we take it up on December 1st. But a lot of work, a lot of effort has gone into that. I know your staff has also contributed to that effort over the many, many years. And so I look forward to the State Water Board having a robust discussion and hopefully taking action on those provisions finally. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Tam. And I would hope that a big part of the biodiversity discussion in the future also includes forest management. We've seen, we don't want monocultures. We want active forests that can support multiple activities, including a large providing good habitat for an awful lot of species. And that's, I think, on my own personal biodiversity checklist, a big item. And it's too early to talk about it this year, probably, but I'm talking about WQCC. But I think we need to start that discussion very soon, and I'm hoping we can start it in the next chair's meeting, in fact. So, thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 5. Executive Officer's Report. Patrick will discuss the board's ongoing response to COVID-19 and provide updates on the current budget situation.
So Dr. Longley, I think we would probably go to item 4, the public forum first.
Oh, did I skip that? I'm sorry. I'll go back to you in a minute. Yes, you're right. Agenda item 4. That's why we have an executive officer, keep the chair straight. And a lot of other things, of course. As a reminder, if you intend to present or comment on any of the items in this hearing, or think you might be interested in commenting, you should already be in the Zoom meeting room using the meeting ID provided on the board's website and the password that you received from our staff. If you've not already received a password, you can email us now at agenda5waterboards.ca.gov. Include the words, 2 words, speaker comment in the subject line so that we can follow up with you. For those in the Zoom meeting, you will be on mute and your camera turned off until it is your turn to speak. Our meeting host, Dean Coughlin from our IT team, will then unmute you and ask you to turn on your camera if you have one. When you're done speaking and the board members have completed asking questions, you'll be placed on mute and your camera turned off. Janelle, has anyone submitted an email requesting to speak on any topic which is not on the board agenda today?
Dr. Longley, there's one person, Juan Figueroa, on the spreadsheet, and I'm not sure which item he is interested in or if he wants to speak during public forum.
Okay, who is that?
Juan Figueroa.
Okay, Mr. Figueroa, if we could turn his, if we could admit him to, and we could
Okay, Mr. Figueroa, you've been.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Okay. Thank you for having me. And so it's not on the agenda item, but I'm a resident from the town of Terabella, California, which is here in South Tulare County. Resident and community member at large of Terabella. And so as a proud resident of Terabella my whole life of 38 years, minus the few years I lived in the Bay Area while I attended UC Berkeley, there have been many changes in our great little town. And yes, I do understand that change is difficult for many, but with growth comes change as well. Many may have argued that the change was for the worse, but before there was an issue with the smell, so-called smell in Terabella, which as good stewards and neighbors, Seton Farms has been able to minimize by 800%. There was nothing but praise for helping create the change our town so dearly needed. Beautification projects occurred, which as part of a continued quality improvement plan outlined by Seton Farms shall continue for years to come. And so pretty much advocating on behalf of our community. The smell has tremendously been minimized in our town. We were able to gather 1,025 signatures affirming that there was no odor in the heart of our community. One thing that we've learned with Seton is that they're great neighbors. They provide back to the community financially, I mean, aesthetically. They're great neighbors to have there. Yes, there was an issue with the smell the previous year, but that issue has been addressed by them. And I mean, tremendously, and we're greatly impressed. They do so much for our community, and that's the biggest part. If they're allowed to expand and they produce more revenue, in turn, that provides more tax money, which gets brought back into our small town. I mean, like I've mentioned, they've been great neighbors. They provide so much for our community. In terms of them being a nuisance, as mentioned before, there was a smell last year, but all of that's been diminished from our town. It's amazing. They've been in harvest for the past month or so, and apparently nobody's even known that they've been in harvest. Just advocating on our behalf of our small town of Terabella as a resident. If there are minor orders that may occur, that's definitely something that's not injurious to the health. If not, that was my number one concern the previous year. But since there was no health concerns that were being brought up, most definitely it was off my radar. And by all means, definitely here advocating for our town, and of course, the continued expansion and growth of one of the great companies there in town that's been giving back to our community so much. And this is only the beginning. There's plans for them to create a high-skilled technical school there in town as well, which is humongous, especially for a small town that when I grew up there of 2,200 people between the ages of 18 and 25, a lot of people tend to get lost in that age bracket, but I mean, they're giving back. They're creating opportunities, and ultimately they're changing lives. And pretty much that's, I wanted to share that with the board in terms of our voice out here in Terrebonne.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions? Janelle, are there any other speakers?
Not at this time, Dr. Longley.
Okay. Patrick, do you have a comment at this time, or should we move on to the next item?
Well, I don't, but I do want to make sure that everybody who potentially wanted to speak to the board during the public session did have the opportunity to do so. There's a couple names I see in the participant list I don't recognize being associated with any particular item. So please, if you are on the Zoom call and you wish to speak during the public forum, let us know by raising your hand right now, and we can unmute you and have you participate.
No, tell them not to raise their hand, please.
It should be an option on the Zoom platform that you're working on.
Exactly.
Yeah, underneath the participant list are some options, one of those being raise your hand.
Or *9 if you're on the phone, because I do see one call.
Correct. I am not seeing any hands.
If folks are trying to get in, continue to try, and let's move on to the
There's a couple that came in that just wanted to listen.
Okay.
Real quick.
Let's move on to the executive officer's report. We can come back to the public forum if necessary.
No, and I do appreciate the comments from the person from Terabella. There was, and the board members did, I want to acknowledge the fact that the board members did receive a letter from a group from Terabella that continues to make allegations about odor conditions. And the board's prosecution team has done a number of inspections that were following up on citizen complaints over the past month or so and issued a notice of violation. Again, these matters aren't queued up for the board's consideration here today, but I just want to inform anybody who is on the Zoom platform right now or listening through the Cali PA portal that the board members themselves have received both the complaint letter and the board's notice of violation. Again, we're not taking any action here today. I just want to express that the board is on top of it. They do take the complaint seriously. That said, we will make sure that any follow-up actions are grounded on evidence that is supportable in front of this board, in front of a court if the need be. So again, we take the complaints very seriously. Clay's unit is following up as appropriate. We're getting out there to the community to make sure that if there are any complaints, that they are, that we can substantiate them and that we can take appropriate action if we do find that nuisance conditions are still occurring out there. So I just want to let the board know that as well.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the board? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 5.
All right. So I want to start off with a couple presentations of some awards for some folks who are very, very, who have done great work for the board. First up, and I think I see it on the Zoom platform, is Colt Brockman, who works out of our Reading office. And Colt, I think I see you there. Colt Brockman has been selected to receive the Superior Accomplishment Award for his contributions to the Central Valley Water Board. He's an environmental scientist in the Non-Point Source Unit in the Reading office and provides oversight for timber harvesting and fuels management activities across 6 national forests managed by the U.S. Forest Service. In addition, Colt serves as the Forest Activities Programs Liaison for the Timber Regulation and Forest Restoration Fund grants and is a subject matter expert for several grants. So when the board has limited amount of money to put into these kind of projects, grant money, there's a lot of contract coordination that's needed. That's what Colt does, one of the things he does out there. Colt started with the water boards in April 2018, bringing with him a diverse background and professional experience that includes wildland firefighting, rangeland management activities, and service in the U.S. Army. Colt's experience and his professionalism immediately benefited the Forest Activities Program. Colt is dedicated and reliable and brings a solid technical aptitude and ability to communicate with the regulated community. Colt continuously demonstrates his ability to manage a large and diverse workload, quickly adapt and respond to changes, and remain professional in difficult situations. Recently, Colt, as technical lead and liaison to the state board for several grants managed from the Reading office, has effectively facilitated communications between the state board personnel and grantees on several high priority grant projects to ensure project proposals can move forward. He focused on ensuring necessary documentation was submitted and that last minute changes and discrepancies could be accounted for. Colt has also followed through on a complex enforcement matter involving discharges from a rural road in Colusa County, where he successfully worked with the county personnel to ensure corrective actions were taken and will be assisting the county in monitoring to ensure that dischargers have been effectively remediated. Colt also serves as the Forest Activities Program's resident range management expert and has been instrumental in providing feedback to the state board on impacts and management of grazing in forested landscapes. We are highlighting just a few examples of the projects Colt has voluntarily taken on and excelled at, especially impressive given his already full core workload. He is hardworking, dependable, professional, and has a positive attitude that's appreciated by all who have the opportunity to work with him. For this and much more, we are pleased to provide Colt this recognition. And I do want to say personally, Colt, I know Clint was incredibly excited when you came aboard, simply because of the background that you had. And I think the proficiency that you had in navigating the hiring process and demonstrating your commitment to these issues, and the feedback since then has just been spectacular. I know you're a key to the success of the Reading programs up there, and I really want to thank you for your service. And I think Carl will appreciate the fact that the board doesn't just hire Navy guys; we do hire an Army guy every once in a while.
Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated.
Well, certainly, congratulations, and I commend you for your service, not only with the board, but with the U.S. Army.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and this is Carmen. I'm far away. I'm in Merced, but always impressed when I see such a good mix of people that aren't just all office or all in the field. And that's a misconception that people are one thing or another. And I'm always impressed with the talent that the regional boards are able to procure with skills on both sets. So I heard grant writing at high levels, which I appreciate. I know you're out there actually on the ground. So thank you for choosing us. And we hope that you get the support that you need and that you're happy with us.
Oh, yes, very happy. Get all the support I need. Great management team, great coworkers. Know I made a great decision moving over to the Central Valley Water Board.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Colt. I appreciate it. And we've got one more award to give out to someone I've worked with for years. This award goes to Stacy Gotham, and I think I see it on the phone. Stacy, you there? Or on the Zoom call?
Looking, Patrick. I have a John Gotham.
Yeah,
That's
why don't
him.
you unmute that one?
That's Stacy.
That's me.
All right.
Hello there.
All right, there you go. That's my son. He's doing distance learning, so his name dominates the screen.
As long as you don't have any online gaming going on, I think the bandwidth should be pretty safe.
Oh, no.
I know that's been a factor for some folks, but it's my pleasure to present Stacy Gotham for the Superior Accomplishment Award. A 20-year veteran with the Central Valley Water Board, Stacy has been the lead staff for the office's Mines program work since May of 2017, managing 22 active abandoned mine sites. She has been applying her extensive knowledge of the Water Board's programs in her oversight of these complex and challenging projects. Stacy has been working with the Lyondell Environmental Custodial Trust to identify projects that could be implemented with the remaining settlement funds for the Bully Hill and Rising Star mines. During September, this multi-year effort culminated with the Trust's submittal of a technical memorandum with its recommended projects. Her efforts involve multiple site inspections, each a 6-hour drive round trip, consistent messaging and communications with the Trust, in-depth review of the mine site conditions and water quality, and briefings to managers and board members. The technical memorandum provides a solid basis to support the Central Valley Water Board's decision about the projects to be funded. Another project Stacy is working on involves a closed heap leach mine in Lassen County. Initially, she applied her exceptional analytical skills to evaluate water quality data for the mine site. She recently drafted a 13267 technical reporting order to obtain reports needed to support revision of the waste discharge requirements. Stacy has also been working with representatives of the Washington mine in its efforts to recover from damage sustained during the Carr fire. She recently initiated technical working sessions with mine representatives to identify sustainable approaches to managing and regulating discharges from the mine's adits. Another example of her superior work is her assessment of the status of abandoned gold mine near Lake Oroville. Based on observations made during the initial inspection, she coordinated a second inspection that included the Department of Toxic Substances Control and the Division of Safety of Dams. The second inspection was conducted under an administrative warrant issued by the Butte County Superior Court because the property owner was uncooperative. The inspection participants identified water quality issues, hazardous waste levels of metals, and the need for a geotechnical evaluation of the tailings dam stability. Stacy's experience and expertise are very much valued by the management team. She is most deserving of recognition for her capable management of mines work and her contributions to the office. And Stacy, I know from working with you in the past, Stacy maintains an incredible energy to work on these projects, always applies very, very sharp analytical skills. I know I've worked with you through NPDES permits, WDRs, a whole manner of different board actions. I'm really glad when you got appointed to the mines program because some of the toughest water quality issues are to be found there with the smallest amount of money to deal with them. So congratulations for this award, very well deserved.
And I congratulate you too. You have almost an impossible task addressing the EMD issues. Lots and lots of issues and not enough funding or people really to fully address it. You guys have taken on an unbelievable task. I think that you need to be commended for just keeping us on top of this issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And I'll just say that at least in my experience, not only are you clearly doing a great job at your work, but you're probably also a part-time teacher and computer fixer for your kids and all this other stuff. So to keep all that up, at high level, positive energy, heavy technical work, and still holding it down at home, it's really impressive. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. That's the acid mine drainage work that's come out of Region 5 board, I think, is something that we talked about writing a book earlier. We could write volumes about that work. It's truly very superb work that's taken place over the years.
All right. If there aren't any more comments on those two awards, let me see if I can just talk a little bit about some of the issues that you see in the executive officer's report. I want to touch on just a few things that we're doing here. Let me see if I can share this screen really quick. Just a couple slides to kind of describe some of the work that we have going on. And much of it these days, I think, is centered around what we are doing with respect to staffing issues that we have here at the board and where our staff are being directed and what the resources that we have at our disposal these days. Central Valley Water Board, we're a fairly big agency. These numbers are from beginning of August, so they actually have changed downward just a little bit and a little bump upward, as you'll see a little bit in a minute. But overall, we've got about 270 authorized positions. As of August 1, we had about 31 vacant positions, and those are spread around over our 3 offices, as you can see up on the screen. So about 148 with 16 vacancies in Sacramento, 76 with 8 vacancies in Fresno, and 51 with about 7 vacancies in Redding. And moving through, I just want to kind of illustrate the fact that, real quick, we currently, as I've mentioned before, we're on about a 10% time-based reduction for all of our staff due to the personal leave program. It operates similar to a furlough program, but basically gives our staff 2 days off per month in exchange for about a 10% pay cut. So that's a real reduction in the amount of time that we have available to work on planning projects, to work on permits, to work on enforcement actions. In addition, we've got about 5% of our staff have been redirected to the California Department of Public Health's contact tracing program. This is a huge project that CDPH stood up very quickly to make sure that the state arrests the spread of COVID-19. And basically, those contact tracers work hand in glove with local health departments to do the follow-up that's necessary to make sure that COVID-19 cases are addressed and that notifications go out to people who may have had interactions with people who test positive for COVID-19. And lastly, and I think this is something I'll get into just a little bit, there have been fairly significant cutbacks to the cannabis program, certainly, but also limited cutbacks to the oil field program as well. Thankfully, what we've been doing as an organization is we manage our vacancies such that we can reduce staff within those programs by filling vacancies in other programs, which overall reduces the number of staff we have overall, the authorized positions overall, but it makes sure that we're not issuing pink slips to any of our staff, that the valuable insight that they've gained from working with the board isn't lost and doesn't go to a separate entity. Really quickly, I do want to describe something because I know this has been kind of front of mind for many of our dischargers, for many of our staff, and certainly an issue that the state board addressed. I want to just let you know, and this is something that really doesn't come to light that much during good times, but it definitely comes to light when there are difficult financial circumstances. But when a permit fee is paid to the State Water Board for one of the projects that we work on, so we issue a permit, they pay the fee, and about 60% of that fee goes to permitting staff, goes to the folks that are actually writing the permit, doing the inspection report, doing the permitting inspections, doing the follow-up, reading the monitoring reports, etc. But about 40% of that fee goes to foundational programs like the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program, or SWAMP, the planning section like TMDLs, the Delta program, that makes sure all of the architecture that supports the individual permits is up and running too. And so this is kind of an important thing to keep in mind. And I also want to kind of say how this meets what the State Water Board did. So I know when I talked to you in August and when I talked to you in June, there wasn't any certainty as to what the State Water Board was going to do with its water quality fees. However, in September, the State Water Board adopted a modest fee increase that basically allowed the State Water Board to fund new positions authorized by the legislature, including a harmful algal bloom new positions within our region. Very, very limited, but it's nice to have those positions. However, it didn't fully fund the permitting staff that would be ordinarily paid for if the fees were completely raised, as we were anticipating in January. So there's about 10 positions that need to be held open in the permitting sections all throughout the 9 regional boards. There's a few more positions that need to be held open at the state board too, basically positions that we're not going to hire, we're not going to pay for, and that represents a fairly significant cost savings. So the cannabis program, however, was still cut back. Those cutbacks I talked about on the prior slide, those are not going to be made up. So we'll go into it in a little greater detail tomorrow when we get the cannabis update. But since we're on the EO report, I want to talk about this briefly. So the fees from the cannabis program were far less than anticipated. A lot of that is due to the fact that we have a lot of counties within our region that still have cannabis as a prohibited activity, so we're not collecting fees from those counties. And adoption, frankly, the transfer from the black market to the gray market to the legal market has been slower than the state anticipated for a number of different reasons. And that's not just within the state board and regional board, that is statewide. CDFA has had issues there, CDPH has had issues there. So this is kind of a global problem with the state. However, what the state was doing was essentially propping up that the difference in our projected fee revenues, and if I say our, it's a state board's projected fee revenues, with general fund monies. And when they were cut in this fiscal year, when they were looking for places to trim, they trimmed that back fairly substantial. So what that meant was for our program staff, our cannabis program staff were cut down by about half, which is a huge cutback to the program. And that was discussed, I think, fairly extensively, and will be discussed even more tomorrow. But it also means that there's a significant reduction in foundational staff across all of the regional boards. Statewide, this means that there's going to be about 35 losses in the cannabis program staff, but also there's about 20 foundational staff that are spread across not the cannabis program, but again, programs like SWAMP, like planning. And so there's about 20 of those positions that need to be held vacant throughout the state. And unfortunately, we, just because of when the music stopped on the musical chairs, we actually have a lion's share of the total foundational positions that are currently open. So of the currently 15 foundational positions that are open that need to be held open, and they have to find 5 more to bring it to 20. And they're probably going to do that as people retire from that program. There's another position that they're not going to fill. We got about 7 of those out of the 9 regional boards that have a total of 15. So this is actually pinching a few of our programs that are foundational programs, including the TMDL program, especially, but a couple other areas as well. And I know Office of Enforcement is actually getting a little bit of a pinch too in that area. So there's a few areas that we need to work with the State Water Board to rebalance. They've made that commitment, but when you look through the vacancy numbers, this is part of the story. This is why we're not necessarily filling up to full staffing right away. Lastly, I want to make one point, and getting a little bit away from the more dismal news about what we can and can't do with positions, to talk a little bit about what we're doing with respect to racial justice, racial equity here at the Central Valley Water Board. First, there's 4 staff, I believe, that have applied to the State Water Board's Racial Equity Working Group. And we've worked with, it's a leadership group here at the Central Valley Water Board. We've authorized them to spend 10 to 25% of their time working on these projects for the next 1 to 2 years to really work on developing new trainings, new approaches, new outreach, new ways of doing things to help advance racial equity here in the Central Valley. And that's a pretty significant commitment. It means that everybody else will be pulling a little bit more weight than usual as they spend their time on this. But I think from what you have said, you as board members have said, that this is certainly a key issue for us. And certainly I believe it is a key issue for the regional board to maintain its legitimacy. We have to address these issues, and we have to show that we're responsive to the communities that we purport to serve. Second, as a leadership group, we're gradually kind of trying to absorb the lessons that the state board has learned from participating in the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, the GARE project, these are gradually being incorporated into our processes here at the Central Valley Water Board. They include things like a recommendation, which is actually now a mandate, that when we have a hiring panel to hire somebody onto the regional board, at least one person, and ideally almost the entire panel, will have had an unconscious bias training or racial equity training, so that they understand that, you know, even good people going into some of these evaluations might have hidden biases. And it gives you tools to work with those to make sure that you make a decision that is based solely on the candidate's merits and not on any unconscious bias that any selector may have. We also are including as mandatory in all of our interviews and hiring decisions a consideration of how the candidates have addressed issues of diversity and making sure that they are open and see the value in participating and working with diverse teams within the boards and outside of the board. And lastly, I think the Office of Public Participation at the State Water Board is reinvigorating an environmental justice roundtable that has lied dormant for the past few years. And we've made commitments from some of our management to participate in that, and we're kind of doing the initial steps there. This is all in addition to some of the additional trainings that we're pursuing. We're trying to make sure that we can kind of get that lined up as the finances become a little more clear for the next few months, and the tools as part of a survey going out to our staff to make sure that we're addressing these issues in a reasonable and responsive manner. So again, those are all a few issues. They're kind of above and beyond what's in the text of the executive officer's report, but I wanted to let you guys know what we're working on and some of the issues I know that we've been discussing in times past with respect to racial equity and with respect to the personnel issues that we have here at the Central Valley. So with that, I will invite any of you that have any questions on what I've just said or on any of the issues that are in the executive officer's report, which is online for you to review.
Well, thank you, Patrick. And as Pam pointed out, the second day of WQCC is going to be focusing on this same issue. It's an important one, and I appreciate the leadership you've taken for our board. Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for providing that information. And this is the time we're in, so all of the information you shared, it's important, and I'm glad that we have put it into our programs and going to try to move forward with it. Racial issues are definitely one of the things to be dealing with. I just wanted to ask a question on from the executive officer's report on performance measures, and has there been any impact as a result of this crisis that we are in that would affect our performance measures that we've established?
You know, it's actually been there's a few things that I think we've been adapting for. I think, you know, some of the permitting performance measures and kind of how, you know, there's basically two things when we kind of develop performance targets. The state board and US EPA work on a series of performance targets that are very, very, I don't want to say rigid, but they're very kind of geared towards how many widgets are you producing, you know, very, very quantifiable, very defined How many permits are coming across the line? What is your permit backlog? What are certain nuts and bolts that we have within the programs? And I think in recognition of kind of the fact that we have about a 15% time-based reduction, they have essentially reduced all of those targets by 15%. And I think that's totally reasonable, and we're working to kind of hit those targets, and we're doing fairly well. I do want to call out as kind of a high point the fact that the NPDES permitting unit really slammed through. Despite a lot of naysayers, the general order that you approved a couple of years ago that has really resulted in us keeping our backlog within the NPDES program relatively well within what the US EPA kind of authorizes. And frankly, we're way ahead of many of the other regions because of that general order, because of kind of innovation in that area. With respect to what we're doing with other items, the stuff that isn't necessarily counted within the state board's performance metrics, I think there's a few things that are a little bit more delayed. Some of the things that involve heavy kind of public participation, unrolling a new program, those, like some of the CV salt stuff, we took those back to the drawing board, kind of redeveloped how we're going to do the public participation, worked through a series of issues. So those were delayed. But I think, we didn't sit on our hands while we were doing that. There's a few issues that kind of rose to the top. There were certain inspections that we did that actually increased during the COVID-19 because the inspections could be conducted in a socially distanced manner. So somebody going out on a truck and doing a visual inspection. And importantly, I think, Sue's unit with the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program and Bob Ditto's folks developed a means of doing essentially a desktop audit using satellite imaging and other kind of components. And those actually skyrocket. They're the type of things that these can be done very well from somebody sitting at home. So I think that on balance, we're actually doing pretty good. I do, from personally, I think, when we hear this from staff quite regularly, I think as a management group, I do think that we have been emphasizing, and I know Eileen at the State Water Board has been emphasizing to all the regional board leaders that we are not in a position of doing more with less. We are in a position of doing less with less. We are still maintaining kind of our program integrity. We still strive for a very high level of customer service. But I think we have to recognize that people are fairly strained these days. You have situations where spouses have lost jobs. You are doing the things that Board Member Ramirez pointed out, where you're teaching your kid, your first graders, second graders at home doing distance learning, which is a whole nother ball of wax for some of our staff. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible with letting them work outside of normal business hours to get their job done. But also recognizing that, productivity, if we maintain, even that 15% productivity, that's doing really, really well. I think we have to recognize that this whole COVID-19 pandemic is taking a toll on folks from, it's not like you're just working from home. You're working from home, but also all the outside pressures, all the psychological issues. We talk quite a bit with staff about resources available to them, including I think the State Board has been very good about messaging for what's called an employee assistance program. If you're feeling kind of bombarded, if you're feeling a little bit more stressed out, you can access that. They have trainings, everything from yoga to mental health. So we're trying to be as proactive as possible, kind of to talk to folks about how these issues affect and erase the stigma of saying, hey man, I can't do it today. I'm a little overwhelmed. So I think we're doing really well. I think staff are, I'd be lying if I said staff are doing great. I think we're doing tough, just like everybody else is doing tough. But I think, the core issue with respect to performance targets, we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good hitting those. And I think we're still trying to be as responsive as possible to stakeholders and dischargers and members of the community. So I know that's a longer answer than you were probably looking for, but that's the big picture.
No, but I appreciate that because as I asked the question as a board member, the public needed to hear that as well, and the detail that you gave. And I think it's tremendous that, you know, the different programs, like you said, with the irrigated lands and some of the ways that they're using and things of sort, those are things that we need to hear. So I really appreciate you taking the time and giving us the detail. I think it was necessary. Thank you very much.
And Patrick and I have discussed the productivity issue. It, like every other aspect of what we do, is going to be changed by COVID. A lot of new tools, as he pointed out, are being used, and many of these tools can be carried over into more normal times and allow us to be even better at what we're doing as a board. One of the things that came out, and I think you may have mentioned this earlier, Patrick, but in a survey that was done and that you showed me, a lot of the staff like working at home and don't want to come to the office more than 1 or 2 days a week. If they can be more productive with that kind of a mode, more power to them.
Yeah, no, I do think that was the Cali PA survey that they did, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but yeah, it was a snap survey, not scientific at all, and certainly it's beyond just the board. But I think what we're hearing fairly resoundingly is, one, I miss my coworkers a heck of a lot, so I do want to come to the office, you know, a couple days out of the week. But two, I do not miss that commute, and you know, the extra time that I have not commuting to the office is time that I spend a little bit more time working, which, you know, we want to make sure that that's kept to a minimum. You know, that's your time now. But it's important, I think, you know, recognizing that there are now tools that can enable folks to work from home more efficiently than before. You know, we're an environmental agency too, you know, and we know that the greenhouse gas footprint goes down when we have folks working from home and not making that car commute. Though there's a number of folks I know that still bike in, you know, to get their exercise every once in a while. But you know, realistically, I think we are really seeing a transformation of the workplace, and you know, as was mentioned earlier with the meetings, that bell is not going to get unrung. It really has affected some permanent changes here. I think you know, we have to be cognizant as we move forward that whatever, you know, savings, whatever kind of you know, if our workspace contracts, if things change, we have to make sure that we don't just kind of pocket the money, but that it's used very appropriately to make sure that the work from home experience is, you know, safe, is productive. You know, things like ergonomic issues are dealt with. I know, you know, initially one of the fundamental issues was, hey, I don't have a chair at home that matches the ergonomics of my work chair. I don't have a good place to work. I'm killing myself over my you know, my kitchen table, doing 8 hours a day on that. So, you know, as we sort those issues out, I think we can really transform the way we do business, and I think hopefully transform it for the better.
Thank you very much. Any comments by board members? Questions?
This is Carmen. I think that your report was great. I think it covered a lot of important issues that have been on my mind, certainly COVID, racial justice, efficiency, safety. I like that maybe inadvertently or with very strategic planning, we've been lean as a region for a long time when it comes to staffing. So, you know, we've learned to be efficient even before this. So keeping that up has been really good. So I know it doesn't happen alone, Patrick. I know you're sort of the face that we see, but, you know, speaking as this board member, I would say that, you know, please let staff know that we recognize the trickiness of doing work at home. They're being efficient, they're being honest with their time, they're delivering, you know, the product that they need to, the science that they need to, and we're very grateful. And you know, just stay on the path that we're on. I appreciate it.
Any further comments?
Yes, this is Raji. Patrick, again, I'll echo Carmen's comment. I agree with everything her and Denise had to say. We appreciate your report and the fact that you're taking the leadership on the racial equality program. I think is wonderful. I do have a question for you in regards to the EO's report, and there was a decrease in positions regarding the oil fields. Can you tell me real quick what is leading to that?
So there's a component that was funded through. So most of our permits are done by fees. There was a minor reduction of a couple staffing positions within the oil field unit. I think Clay can probably get into the details of that a little bit more, but realistically, it didn't have a huge impact. I mean, it was nothing like the cannabis impact, but it did result in a reduction of a couple staff that were working on the enforcement and the permitting of some of the oil field projects that we have down in the Fresno office. That really just represents, whenever we go to the legislature, they kind of authorize a whole slate of positions, and those were cut back a little bit. I think part of it, again, I think the justification was there's less activity within the oil producing areas. But again, I think it was something that we couldn't quite see the justification for. But I think it's something that as a unit, we're absolutely able to absorb that. It was not like the cannabis program where cutting the program in half let us just scramble. We figured out a way to kind of reallocate those staff and still have a very significant presence down there.
Thank you. Yeah, I was curious. I figured it might have to do with the slowdown in the oil fields, if that was correlated or not.
Yeah, the funding for oil fields is just a little different from the funding from our regular programs.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further comments? If not, we'll go on to agenda item 6. Okay, agenda item 6, approval of minutes from prior board meetings, and that is the 13th and 14th August 2020. Do I have any comments? If not, can I have a motion?
This is Carmen. I would move the minutes as presented.
This is Mark. I'll second that.
Been Carmen moved to accept the minutes. Mark seconded. Roll call, please.
Janelle, if you could.
Board Member Bradford?
Yes.
Board Member Brar?
Yes.
Board Member Kadara?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ramirez?
Yes.
Chair Longley?
Yes. Motion carries. 5-0. Okay, moving to agenda item 17, the board meeting calendar for 2021. At this time, the board will discuss the board meeting calendar for 2021. There was an email with those dates, the same email that discussed the FTP. And, I had it here in front of me a minute ago and it disappeared. Those dates are February 18th and 19th, April 22nd and 23rd, June 17th and 18th, August 19th and 20th. There we go.
Let's put it up there, see if you can.
October 14th and 15th, and December 16th and 17th. So, all those are proposed now to be internet Zoom meetings, but that may change the latter part of the year. I would hope so. I'd like to go back to Reading and see the good work being done there.
Yeah. I'll second that.
Mm-hmm.
Carl,
This is
I have a
Carmen.
conflict on the August meeting dates. I'm available either week before or after, however.
That causes no problems for me. Other board members could look at their calendars. Also, I was a little bit concerned that December 16th, 17th is a week right before Christmas. Was there a reason we couldn't hold it the week before?
So I think we could. I'm going to pull up what, generally speaking, we could move the December one back a week. It just, it can't go much further back than that because it squeezes the board deadlines too much for everything that's got to be done. Can I just ask, can we go back to August so I can at least look at those other two dates? What dates were you proposing? Either before the
13.
Yeah, either week before or after would be fine.
Okay, let me just check here. So if we went back, okay, let's see, I'm just checking. I do check a list of the different holidays every time and make sure that we're not crossing anything. I'm trying to do that really quick here. See anything? Okay.
12th and 13th, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So that, I think that's, it would be the 13th. Yeah, 12th and 13th.
12th and 13th.
Yep.
And the 9th and 10th of December?
The 9th and 10th of December. Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, any issues from any board members with those dates?
No, those dates all work fine. Even the modified dates work fine for me.
Great.
Yeah, those are okay.
Unless there's further discussion, we will accept those dates by consensus. I don't believe we need to form a motion, so.
Yeah, we do not need to vote on that. We will just set
we
those
have
dates.
consensus on those dates. We'll move on. Good. We'll move on then to agenda item 8, the Irrigated Waste Consolidation Unit Project in Sacramento County. This is the time and place for a hearing to consider a resolution approving an initial study and negative declaration for the Irrigated Waste Consolidation Unit Project in Sacramento County. Is there anyone present who is contesting the proposed actions and wishes to present evidence or testimony on this matter? Now,
Dr. Longley, for this item, if we could do kind of what Patrick did earlier and ask people to raise their hands in the Zoom platform.
Okay.
So either
if individuals on the Zoom platform, if you wish to speak to this issue, please raise your hand. And
or
you
press star 9.
On your telephone, it's star 9. On the Zoom platform, it's down at the bottom where you can raise your hand. Are you seeing anybody?
No, sir. No hands raised.
Okay. Since there is no one present to contest this matter, the board will proceed based on the agenda materials and the record. Are there any late revisions or staff comments?
No late revisions, Dr. Longley. No comments.
Does council have any legal issues to discuss at this time? Council?
Is this agenda item 17, you said?
This is agenda item number 8. This
Oh,
is
number 8. No issues. Sorry about that. Someone rang the doorbell right when you announced it. No, there are no issues at this time.
one of those things that happens with Zoom. Okay, very good. The hearing is now closed. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
So move to approve the resolution as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Carmen moved. Denise seconded. The advantage of being on the board for a while, everybody being on the board for a while, you get to recognize voices. Call the roll, please.
Board Member Bradford?
Yes. No,
Board Member Brar?
Yes.
Board Member Cardara,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ramirez,
Yes.
Chair Longley.
Yes. Got 5 yeses. No motion carries. That takes us then to item 9 on the agenda. And I suspect we need a break about this time, 10:30.
Dr. Longley, I think, I don't know if you want to take care of this business, but I believe the Germano and Jacinta Soares dairy is now a stipulated order, and I believe the board could take a vote on that, without discussion, should the board be inclined to do that and just wrap up business on number 12, because I think there's some folks here just want to make sure that that goes smoothly.
Okay. This is, we'll move on then to agenda item 12. The Romano and Jacinta Soares, Germano Soares Dairy Number 1, Stanislaus County. This is a time and place for a public hearing to consider a stipulated cease and desist order for Germano Soares Dairy in Stanislaus County. Is there anyone present who is contesting the proposed actions and wishes to comment on this matter? And as we stated before, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you have not submitted a comment card and wish to comment. And staff, if you could tell me what you see, I'd appreciate it.
No hands yet.
No hands. Janelle, do you have any speaker cards?
One moment, Dr. Longley.
I am not seeing any.
There's only Robert Busby giving the presentation.
Okay.
Should one be required?
Since there's no one present to contest this matter, the board will proceed based on the agenda materials and the record. Are there any late revisions or staff comments?
No late revisions, Dr. Longley.
Thank you. Does council have any legal issues to discuss at this time?
None, Dr. Longley.
Thank you. Hearing's now closed. Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the stipulated cease and desist order.
This is Carmen. I would move the stipulated cease and desist order as presented.
This is Mark. I'll second.
Carmen's moved. Mark seconded. Roll call, please.
Board Member Bradford,
Yes.
Board Member Brar,
Yes.
Board Member Cardara,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ramirez,
Yes.
Chair Longley.
Yes. 5 votes in favor, none against, no abstentions. Motion carries. Very good. We're back to the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. About how long is that item, Patrick?
Sue, do you know how much the combined presentation would be?
Yes.
Dr. Longley, this is Adam. I'd say this item's going to go at least an hour, a little more.
Okay, let's take a break. It's now about 10:33. Let's be back at 10:45. We're in recess.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Dr. Longley, have you been flying your plane lately?
Let's see. On the 29th of September, flew up to Seattle. Week later, flew back. Not flown since.
Do you see a lot of the smoke? Is that affecting your flying?
And when we were off here, I was just reading about the fact that September, well, first of all, Weather Service in 1880 started keeping records. And this September is the hottest time. And that was very notable. When you're flying with the charts you get that they have today, one of the things you have to avoid is fire areas because they're flying aircraft in to dump fire retardant and that sort of thing. It was amazing going up through California and Oregon. Oregon was as bad as California. A number of fire areas, not just in the Sierras and farther up in the Cascades, but also on the coast. Yeah, it was interesting. A lot of smoke going up. You have to get high to get out of the smoke. So, not a good time. And this really needs to be a lesson to people that things that have been going on, the fires, the hot months like September, and quite frankly, October is going to turn out to be a very hot month if it continues, that we're in a different time and it's been brought about by, by climate change or so many scientists claim. And I think that their claims are as I read them, are very, very valid. The data's been out there for a while. And, you can deny it, but you sure can't deny the consequences.
Can't blame it all on forest management.
Well, yes, and forest management. We had a area here up above Fresno that did not burn, and it was surrounded by burn area. And it's an area that was owned or is owned by Southern California Edison. They have a forest manager, well, he's since retired, but he's still very active, who really managed that properly. And they talk about diversification. We were talking biodiversity, as we're talking about later. He was managing it for that, but also to provide locations for recreation and so forth. And it didn't burn. The fire came up to it and didn't proceed. It was truly amazing. And it just shows what forest management can do for you. But it's hard to convince a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, there's people that deny that we need any forest management. I see on the other side, on the other extreme side, that they don't think we should touch the forest. Either way leads to a disaster.
Yeah.
So get off my. Now we're at 10:50, but I don't see the other board members yet.
I'm here, Carl.
I see you. I see
Denise.
There's Carmen.
Yeah, Denise is here.
Denise is here. We got a quorum. So let's go ahead. We're back in session. Agenda item 9, Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, Groundwater Protection Formula Update. This time the board will hear an update on the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, Groundwater Protection Formula. This is an information item only and no action will be taken, although the board may ask questions and provide direction to staff. After the board presentations, interested persons will be allowed 3 minutes each to address the board. We'll now hear the staff presentation. And let me say, this program is approximately 17 years old. It's matured well, and I think the next phase of this program is as we look at how we integrate the signal. But that's a topic for another day.
All right, is that coming through?
Hear you loud and clear, Eric.
Great.
Yeah, we see the presentation.
Good
Yes,
morning.
I can see it.
Good morning, Chair Longley and members of the board. My name is Eric Warren. I am a water resource control engineer in the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, and here today to provide an update on current progress toward the development of a groundwater protection formula.
And I see you have two other persons on with you.
Yes.
And board staff test on them. I say that because Tess obviously is not staff, but she's around the office so much, I swear she is.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
All right, I'll start by providing some context for the groundwater protection formula and how the requirements came to be, discuss the proposed methodology submitted in July of this year, highlight some key concerns and public comments received on the document, and then hand off the presentation to Agricultural Coalition representatives who are here to provide some more detail regarding the proposed formula. So in February of 2018, the State Water Board issued Water Quality Order 2018-0002 in response to a petition of the waste discharge requirements for growers in the East San Joaquin River watershed. The order contained targeted changes to the monitoring and reporting requirements, one of which was the development of a groundwater protection formula and subsequent calculation of values and targets for townships within groundwater quality management plan areas. The intent of these changes were to establish target loading rates necessary for growers to achieve compliance with receiving water limitations for groundwater within the time schedule for compliance defined in the WDRs. The revisions identify three key steps in this process, the first of which is the development of a groundwater protection formula. In simple terms, the purpose of the formula is to define a method for estimating the current nitrogen load to groundwater from agricultural lands. The chosen method should reflect variables such as management practices, climate, and land characteristics which affect leaching. Step 2 in the process is to use the formula to calculate leaching estimates, known as groundwater protection values, for each township subject to a groundwater quality management plan. The values will be made available for public comment and subject to executive officer approval. Once approved, the values will need to be incorporated into the plans within 6 months from executive officer approval of the formula and will guide the coalition's groundwater protection strategies moving forward. Based on the loading estimates, the final step in the process is for the coalitions to establish target loading rates that would be necessary to achieve compliance with receiving water limitations. The targets will also be made available for public review and comment prior to executive officer approval and reviewed and revised as necessary every 5 years. Now I will discuss where we are to date in this process. In July of this year, coalitions within the Central Valley jointly submitted a proposed methodology for the groundwater protection formula. It relies on a modified version of the soil water assessment tool to simulate water and nutrient transport within the region. Grower-reported nitrogen applied and yield data would be used along with the site-specific information to develop estimated percolation and nitrogen leaching estimates. The results would then be aggregated to establish a groundwater protection value for each township. More detail regarding this proposed process will be provided by the coalitions at the end of this presentation. The proposed work plan is currently under staff review, and several key issues have been raised. These include the lack of available data to calibrate the model against, the difficulty in accounting for unique land use and management practices implemented in a given year, ensuring the quality of member-reported data used, and accounting for any post-root zone processes that may affect the concentration of nitrate reaching groundwater. Some of these concerns were mirrored in public comments received, which I will discuss more in the following slides. After submittal, the work plan was made available for public comment, and 2 letters were received. The first, submitted by American Rivers and the Environmental Law Foundation, expressed concern regarding the completeness of the groundwater protection formula, the modeling approach for crop rotations and land use changes, and the transparency and public accessibility of the groundwater protection formula. A second comment letter submitted by Clean Water Action, Community Water Center, and Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability discussed methods for improving the model calibration and sought more information regarding how the formula will relate to groundwater protection values and targets, and how local impacts within a township may be identified and mitigated. Both comment letters generally supported the model-based approach that was proposed. With regard to completeness of the formula, staff agreed that additional work still needs to be done to calibrate and validate the model, and support the use of grower data, available field studies, and alternative models to do so. The work plan has also indicated that individual coalitions may wish to modify groundwater protection values to account for post-root zone processes such as recharge and denitrification. We will be making it clear in our review that any addition to the currently proposed methodology would be subject to executive officer approval and public comment prior to approval. In regard to the modeling approach, we acknowledge that accounting for every unique management scenario is a difficult task and may be infeasible in some circumstances. However, the group should be cognizant of the model sensitivity to certain inputs and ensure those factors are being appropriately vetted. Staff is having ongoing discussions with the coalitions regarding their proposed model and its ability to appropriately represent grower practices. Another issue raised by the commenters is the transparency and public accessibility of the groundwater protection formula. The current proposed methodology relies on field-level grower data to develop percolation and leaching estimates for each township. As a result of the state board decision referenced earlier, that data is currently reported to the regional board using anonymous APNs, which maintain the confidentiality of grower data. This creates an issue for interested parties who may want to directly reproduce the model outputs. Staff is currently working with the coalition groups to identify alternative approaches that can be used to confirm the model is producing valid nitrogen loading estimates. This will likely include comparing the model outputs to field studies and published research, township level summaries of grower data, and alternative models such as hydrous. Now I'll hand off the presentation to coalition representatives who are here to provide you the details regarding their proposed approach. Before I do that, I'd like to pause to provide an opportunity for any questions you might have.
I have none at this point. Later I will.
Okay, this is Carmen. I don't have any questions.
Great. Well, I'll hand off the presentation. If Ken, you want to take over?
Sure. Let's hope I can share my screen here. Okay, is that visible to everybody?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'll probably let Tess Dunham handle the majority of the introduction, but just since I'm already here, so to speak, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Kenneth Miller, and I work with Formation Environmental, and I'm representing basically the modeling team as part of the groundwater protection program. And I'm here today to describe the workflow that we've proposed within our work plan and discuss our overall approach. So.
Thank you, Ken. I think I'm finally off mute. I was unable to unmute myself there for a while. I'm sure my husband would love to have a mute button for me at times, but Tess Dunham with Consories and Conway, and here today on behalf of all the coalitions that submitted the work plan for the groundwater protection program, in particular the formula component of it. And at first I want to comment and make sure that the board members understand that this submittal was submitted by all 13 of the irrigated lands coalitions with the exception of Rice, because these requirements within the East San Joaquin precedential order did not apply specifically to the Rice Coalition area. But we have gone through significant time in working with your staff, trying to answer questions. We have also had sessions with environmental justice folks, offering up our consultants in order to also respond to questions that folks have, and are doing that again here today, wanting to work collaboratively and with everybody so it can be understood. First, I want to provide just a quick short background, I think that's important to understand with respect to how the groundwater protection formula, values, and targets came into being within the East San Joaquin order. So first, you all may recall that the State Water Board's process was fairly contentious and went on for several years. At one point in that process, we were directed by the State Water Board members to sit down with representatives of the environmental justice community to see if we can find areas of agreement. Based upon those conversations that included representatives from the Community Water Center, Leadership Council, as well as Clean Water Action, we did come up with proposed recommendations collectively to go to the State Water Board. A key component of that was the groundwater protection part of this program, which was trying to address the ambient condition. It was conceptual at the time. We all had talked about it, had a general understanding of what we think that concept was and how it would relate to meeting receiving water limits. We are now in the process of implementing it, and I think we are all learning a lot as we go forward when you're taking something conceptual into actual reality. So first, I will start with the general order requirements and then talk about the groundwater work plan. So Ken, you want to go ahead and go? So just as a recap, I thought Eric did a great job. What the order requires is the development of a formula, which we consider to be the data and the methods, values, which is what I call those leaching estimates that are happening now, versus targets, which is where we want to go. So township, or the values is current condition, and targets is what we need to change on a township basis so we could meet receiving water limits with respect to nitrate and groundwater from irrigated agriculture within the township. Here is a depiction, I think, that just is a good graphic to show visually what we mean. The formula that we have put forward in the work plan develops groundwater protection values basically at the root zone level. So that it would aggregate information, and Ken will go through and walk through how that would work to determine what is potentially leaching at the root zone from irrigated agriculture in the township that we will be talking about. We all know that after the root zone, there are other processes that do happen that impact what is the level of nitrate that reaches groundwater. We refer to these as post-root zone processes. The general order leaves it open whether those post-root zone processes should be included as part of the groundwater protection value calculation, or do you consider them as part of the township target? The work plan that we submitted is specifically related to the root zone. We have not put forward what those post-root zone processes might be with respect to the value or as part of the targets process. Completely agree with Eric's comment that obviously any changes would be subject to executive officer approval, and very likely this will be part of consideration on the target side. As I indicated, when this was adopted, it was very conceptual in nature. There are a lot of questions as to what does it mean once we get from the formula to the values and then getting to targets and how do they get implemented. And I completely understand why those questions reside. And we are working through those now and wanting to work through them with your staff as well as the environmental justice representatives that were as much a part of developing this concept as we were in the context of the state board's general order.
I'd like to ask just a general question at this time. So
absolutely,
this model pertains to only nitrogen or nitrogen and salt or nitrogen, salt, and other constituents?
At this point, it pertains only to nitrogen. Now, I will let Ken answer as to what could happen with the model for other constituents, but for the groundwater protection formula component, we are looking specifically at nitrogen.
Yeah, that's correct. As of right now, the model is set up to focus on nitrogen and mainly nitrate leaching, but it does have the capability of handling generalized salinity in terms of surface runoff and surface transport, as well as leaching to groundwater. So the model does have that capability, but at this time, the main focus is looking at nitrogen specifically.
Okay, in some areas we have, as an example, a lot of septic tanks. In those areas, and I'm certain of your townships may order or have those in them. Is there any way to sort out the contribution to groundwater?
So at this point, for the values, Chair Longley, we are looking at what is irrigated agricultural loading within that township. We absolutely recognize that there are other sources that will impact probably on the target side, especially like dairies, right? We have a lot of dairies in these townships. So there are, considerable other sources that need to be factored, but for this program as it currently exists, we are talking about the contributions from irrigated agriculture. I think as we move forward into implementation of our management zone implementation plans in CV salts, we start then connecting the dots with respect to other sources as well.
Real good, thank you.
So, and here I think again, we talked about the general order requirements as far as the, what is the formula? And to me, the formula, it's that data and the methods to compute the value. And Ken will go through and give a great presentation to explain how our use of the SWOT model that we are proposing is that formula and how it gets us to the computation of the groundwater protection value. Again, the value is that estimated township leaching as it currently exists today. Extremely important for everybody to understand, in the calculation of getting to the groundship value, we will be using actually reported INMP summary report data from growers. And Kim will explain in the steps how the data is used in step 1 to determine our management matrix for our model runs, and then how we use it again in step 3 to actually calculate and compute the groundwater protection values for a township. So we are using actual real data. And I think just want to make sure that people understand that. So again, the values are where we are now, and then the targets is over time and looking at phasing what we need to change on a loading/concentration basis to ensure that irrigated agriculture is no longer causing or contributing to a violation of the water quality standard. That is the receiving water limit. So as the Ken's going to go into now talking about our root zone groundwater protection formula, which is the use of the SWOT model and an adaptation of it from how it was used previously, the types of data that is going into the model, which is the actual INMP data, all soils, climate, precipitation. There is the physical processes of the nitrogen cycle and how that is incorporated within the SWOT model. And again, it is a root zone physical process. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ken Miller. He did introduce himself before. Ken is with Formation Environmental. who is a modeling firm that has lots of experience with lots of models, in particular in the agricultural setting and context, including the SWAT model. And so they are the lead consultant for the coalitions who we have been working with, along with a very strong team of folks, of experts in agronomy, experts in soil science, experts in data management, you name it, we have a very strong team. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken so he can walk through and explain the formula by using the SWAT model.
Perfect. Thanks, Tess. And so good morning, everybody. And so to kind of get started, I wanted to provide everyone with a little bit of background information on the SWAT model. I think Eric teed it up very nicely, but I'd just like to add to what he has described already. So hopefully everyone leaves understanding, what are we really talking about with respect to the SWAT model and with respect to the Central Valley SWAT model. And so when we say CV SWAT, Central Valley SWAT, what we're referring to is the SWAT model that was calibrated and tailored to Central Valley conditions over the past few years. And that was developed by both the Northern and Southern coalitions for their management practices evaluation programs. And this effort was done in collaboration with other partners, including Natural Resources Conservation Service, as well as researchers over at University of California. And so it was a big effort to develop this model and get it performing as well as we would like with respect to California conditions. And so we figured moving forward that this would be a great jumping off point for implementing the groundwater protection formula. And so some of the reasons that we opted for SWAT include the fact that SWAT is very detailed and it's a physically based model, meaning that it's simulating many different processes, major processes that we know affect things like nitrate leaching within the root zone and ultimately within the crop as well. And so it's physically based. So, all of the equations underneath the hood, are derived from known physical relationships, right? So it's capturing, it's reflecting what we understand to be in reality. And beyond that, the model itself, though it is a landscape level model, often used for very large watersheds, and so well adapted for evaluating an area like the Central Valley. But the model itself, the way in which we've set it up, is actually very granular in space and in time. And so when we have a discrete modeling unit, a unique combination of soil, climate, and crop and management, that unique combination is really operating at the sub-field level. And so we're going into a very spatially detailed representation of the landscape within SWAT. And the model itself is actually running at the daily time step. And this is important because we know, event or things like nitrate leaching, for example, are event-driven processes, right? Nitrate is very soluble. It's often moving with the wetting front through the soil profile. And so it really is an event-driven process. And so when we model at such a fine temporal scale, we're actually capturing those nuances in a nice way. So that was very advantageous for this program. The other nice things about SWAT is, as has been mentioned, it considers all sorts of important inputs that we know kind of matter in the agricultural setting. And those include climatic information, soil information. And so we spent a lot of time procuring the best available data, California-specific data with respect to those two data sets. It does have an explicit crop model, which gives it an advantage over some other modeling options. And we can talk a little bit more about the calibration process, but ultimately we did put a lot of effort into that crop calibration process. We acknowledge that dialing in the water and nutrient balances is really critical for understanding things like nitrate leaching. And so we have spent a lot of time going through that procedure, and that work is documented in a SWAT report provided by the SSJV committee last September, I believe, in 2019. And we're happy to field any questions about that. But for the sake of time, I'll just leave it there that we have spent a lot of effort to date calibrating these crop models with all the available data. And last but not least, with respect to management, you can really detail in SWAT management regimes with respect to irrigation, with respect to fertilization, tillage, so on and so forth. And that really gives us the ability to understand, what are the effects of management practices, and also moving forward, capturing what growers have reported in their INMPs and integrating that into the modeling framework. So a lot of really nice functionality and capabilities of the model for this sort of application. With respect to SWAT's accolades, so to speak, it is a scientifically accepted and robust model. It's been under development for the past, over 30 years by the USDA Ag Research Service. And so a lot of work has gone into developing and refining this model, and it continues to be augmented and improved as time goes forward. And many folks have leveraged this model for carrying out a wide array of environmental assessments. And so to date, there's over 3,500 peer-reviewed journal articles reporting the results of SWAT for various environmental assessments. And just for some more context, the model itself has been adopted by a number of key agencies, including the US EPA, as well as the USDA for carrying out various assessments of interest as well. So it's an open source model. It's well documented. It's used around the world. So it's definitely not created in our garage or anything like that.
So you got input and output of this model, as I understand, based on a township. Do you have any backup way to determine the validity of your data? In other words, is the model giving you what you want?
Yeah, so I would make one correction in that we're modeling. Ultimately, we aggregate results to the township level, but the actual model itself is simulating really at the subfield level. So there'd be many simulations contained within a given township. So there is that nice level of granularity. And in terms, there are literature out there, reporting things like nitrate leaching. Those data are not super widely available and super vast, but we do have information there to kind of gauge, and we're actively working to collect more of that information. On top of that, I think our calibration approach really kind of gives us confidence in our estimates, and ultimately what it means is we spent a lot of time and effort making sure that our crops' water and nutrient budgets are reflective of what we understand in reality. And so that includes nitrogen uptake curves, when and how much nitrogen does the plant want, how much water is the plant consuming, what are the yields that are typical of California, how much nitrogen is removed in those yields. Those sorts of things we have information on, and that's what drives our calibration process. And so, if we believe that putting all this effort into getting our inputs and our crops behaving well, that'll pay off in the sense that, SWAT is a process-based model. And so from a mass balance perspective, if we can adequately reflect all the pieces we know a lot about, what's remaining and subject to the processes that are simulated in SWAT and those root zone processes, we feel that those are valid estimates given the structure of the model itself. And so, of course, we compare to literature that is available and work to collect more field-specific information. But through that calibration approach, we do have good confidence in the outputs that we are achieving at this time.
Well, it wouldn't be easy, but it would seem to me that on a mass balance approach, if you know what's going in and you've calculated what's being removed, what you're actually seeing in the groundwater should be reflective of that.
Yes, so the nitrogen balance is a very good indicator. And basically what we're doing with SWAT is just going one step further and simulating the various pathways and potential fates of that nitrogen balance, right? So what is remaining within the system after applied and removal? We know that not 100% of that is leaching, right? In most situations or in many situations. And so, the nice thing about SWAT is it characterizes those other pathways. And so whether that's, total nitrogen uptake within the plant, and then the returning of residues. So that nitrogen is then in the organic cycle and is breaking down and mineralizing, or if, I think that's a main pathway, if there's increased, soil end storage, or if, the nitrogen just hasn't, moved out of the profile. It could have remained and not been removed in the crop, but it could still be present within the soil and available for the next year's uptake. There are many different pathways for that nitrogen to go, including gaseous loss, for example. And so the reason SWAT was chosen was to kind of better characterize the fates of that nitrogen balance.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the great questions. And so at a very high level, we just wanted to quickly describe both the water and the nutrient balance that's being simulated within SWAT, just to demonstrate the comprehensive nature of the model and give folks an understanding of what's going on. And so in terms of water, it's as I mentioned, comprehensive. And so we have inputs to a system through irrigation, precipitation. And then once that water comes in, it's now automatically starting to be affected by soil properties, right? So depending on the soil properties, that'll influence the rate at which that water can infiltrate the soil and therefore perhaps affect surface runoff. Once that water has infiltrated, the amount of water that soil can retain and the rate at which that water moves through the soil profile is a function of soil properties. There's an actively growing crop that is a function of solar radiation. So we're quite literally digitally growing crops within SWAT. And so as that crop grows, its water demand changes, and that's all reflected and captured. And so there's a loss from the system through evapotranspiration. And then as water is, if the soil is unable to retain the amount of water within it, it'll either be lost through lateral flow, which is relatively minimal in the way we've set up this model, or it is lost through the bottom of the root zone through percolation. And so that would be where our percolation estimates come from, is that excess water draining through the bottom of the root zone as a function of the available water in the soil and the soil properties. So just a complete water balance there. And with respect to nitrogen, another great reason we chose SWAT is because it does a nice job of capturing the nitrogen cycle. And so we know nitrogen is a very dynamic element in these systems in reality, and has many different fates and transformations and mobilities depending on the form in which it's existing at the time. And SWAT does a nice job of capturing that, right? So in terms of inputs, not only do we have a whole suite of mineral fertilizers that we can specify, we can also apply organic amendments such as manures, for example. And once this nitrogen enters the soil system, it basically it reacts as a function of the soil's properties and characteristics, right? And so ammonium, for example, would be nitrified to nitrate, which is a common pathway, a very prevalent pathway within these well aerated systems. But nitrogen can also go in and out of soil organic matter, which we know happens in reality. So that's another really nice capability. And so those residues break down, native soil organic matter breaks down, releases mineral nitrogen. Some nitrogen can go into that soil organic pool. Depending on basically the degree of saturation of the soils, denitrification pathways can be triggered. So there could be gaseous loss in very wet, saturated soils. If ammonical fertilizers are applied, some portion of that could be lost through ammonia volatilization, which is a function of soil temperature and moisture content. And so just demonstrating here that, all these different pathways are being simulated in SWAT. And I should also mention that mobilities are also reflected. And so the rate at which ammonium would move in the soil, a positively charged cation in a negatively charged soil would not move nearly as fast as nitrate in reality and also in SWAT. And in general, most of the mineral nitrogen goes to nitrate within the model as we understand in reality. And so just demonstrating the comprehensive nature of the nitrogen cycle itself. And so with that, that's kind of the background on the model that we had prepared. And I suppose I could just take a brief pause to see if anyone had any outstanding questions before I dive into the description of our workflow for the groundwater protection plan.
Questions?
Sure.
This is Carmen. I don't have any questions.
Yes, I'll be curious how you've been able to calibrate the actual results. I mean, this is a really comprehensive model, obviously. So I assume you'll get to that later on.
Yeah, I can talk more about that perhaps after we describe the workflow here.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so assuming there's no other questions, so basically the way in which we see this whole workflow breaking down is really three steps, right? There's the aggregation of the data, and so getting all those inputs required for the model. Then there's the step of creating what we're calling the root zone library, which is essentially it's a very extensive database of SWOT simulations with many different scenarios simulated in SWOT to capture the range of variability reported by growers in terms of management and yield. And then basically step 3 is relating, again, information reported by growers to those root zone library simulations to pull out relevant SWOT runs that can be used to aggregate up to the township level and generate leachings of or generate estimates of leaching and percolation. And so I'll talk about all these steps in a little bit more detail. I just wanted to kind of give the high level description there. So with respect to step 1, getting our data together in terms of soil, climate, and land use data, a lot of that's been taken care of during the development of the Central Valley SWOT model, including land use with the calibration of the crop models that we do plan to continue that refinement. That work is kind of always ongoing. If you're a modeler, you always want to keep calibrating. So we'll continue to do that. But now we're really talking about trying to integrate, INMP data. So this grower reported data to have that really drive our modeling and inform our modeling. And so through parcel information and INMP information, we can now kind of link that INMP data to a specific place on the ground and therefore understand the climate in which that operation is farming and understand the soils that crop is being grown on and kind of include more context into that INMP report. So once we get all this data together, a main critical step is to create what we're calling the final crop management and yield matrix. And ultimately what that matrix is it's a product of us looking at 3 years worth of INMP data and understanding the range of nitrogen applied on a crop by crop basis and the range of yield for all crops and the relationship between the two. And once we understand that range, we can understand how many model runs do we need to simulate to adequately capture that range and have a model run that is representative of what has been reported. And so ultimately this matrix is going to tell our SWOT model how many scenarios for each crop, how many simulations, and what are the details of those simulations with respect to and applied and with yield. And so once we have all that data procured and analyzed and ready to go, we feed it into our Central Valley SWOT model, right? And so what we are proposing is leveraging an automated framework that we have developed in-house and have tested and been successful with to ultimately create, to gain a lot of efficiency with running. And so basically we can simulate all of SWOT's processes, all those root zone processes, simulating at the daily time step, 30 years. We can do that in an automated fashion and ultimately create many, many, many outputs in a much more efficient way to develop our root zone library. And we feel that this is a more feasible approach to build out this library that can be thus referenced into the future as INP reports year after year continue to come in. We can continue to leverage this library as opposed to setting up discrete township level models year after year and trying to build models time and time again. This approach would be much more efficient in that regard. And so ultimately we plan to automate the SWOT model, create, simulate what's going on in the root zone, and then take those outputs and create what we're calling, for the metaphor of the library, we're calling each crop would have its own book. So within that crop book, we would have a simulation for every crop, for every soil inside of every climate with all the different management that we've seen in the INP data. So an extensive crop book And as we go through and work through all the different crops in the valley, we store them into the root zone library, right? And creating that database. And then so finally, the third step is again using the INP data. So it's initially used to inform the model runs, but in step 3, now we can leverage a query exercise and basically match the most appropriate run within the library, which has an estimate for nitrate leaching and percolation. We can match that to a specific INP report. And I'll walk through exactly what that query looks like, but ultimately using that grower reported information to create a more detailed estimate of leaching, at the parcel level and scaled up to the actual township.
Okay, if I may interrupt you there with a question or some clarification.
Sure.
You're talking about from the parcel level scaled up to the township, remembering that a township is what, 6 miles by 6 miles on a side.
Mhm.
Within that, we have parcels that are much smaller. Can you address, as an example, what's happening on a 100-acre plot that's in some sort of crop or?
Yeah, I do have a slide to kind of walk through that workflow.
Okay, I can wait. So.
Okay, thank you. And I know this is a complicated approach. It's a complicated problem, and so hopefully, feel free to continue with the questions as I talk through this. Before jumping into the actual query algorithm, I wanted to just describe in a little bit more detail what we mean when we say these different crop books that are ultimately going into our roots. And so recall the whole goal here is to have, simulations for pretty much everything under the sun. We want to grow in SWAT, we want to grow all the crops across all the soils, all the climates. We want to simulate scenarios, all the scenarios that have been reported in the INP data over a course of 3 years. So that's the real goal there, is build out that library. And so to walk through an example, we'll just say that, our first book would be a tomato crop. And so continuing with the metaphor, within our book, we have different chapters, right? And so in this case, we're just saying chapter 1 is a function of a unique combination of soil A and climate A. And so as we simulate that, we're capturing all the root zone-based processes in SWAT and understanding, the different fates of nitrogen within that root zone. And so here's the kicker. We plan to simulate this, as many times as required to capture that variability in the INP data. And so basically, we're calling those pages. And through some testing that we've done up front, we found that in general, for most crops in the testing framework, about 400 different simulations was adequate to kind of capture that range of variability that's been reported. But as we move forward, we would make sure that, if we need to do 500 runs, if we need to do 6, it doesn't really matter given the automation framework. We'll simulate as many scenarios needed to capture that variability. And so within this chapter, we're effectively having 400 plus pages. And then the next thing, and then this would also happen for the next chapter, right, which would be another soil, in this case within the same climate, where again, we're simulating that combination of crop, soil, and climate 400 plus times with different management and yield scenarios. So creating this vast library and so on and so forth. And the idea is to do that with every single soil and every single climate in the Central Valley. We would go through this workflow on a crop by crop basis and do it iteratively to make sure that we have, adequate runs. We have an adequate number of runs and they're doing a good job of in terms of reflecting what's been reported. And then we do that for all the crops within the Central Valley. And so we figure that we'll be simulating SWAT somewhere on the order of 40,000 times, probably more than that, to be honest. But many times will we simulate the actual model. And so for some context, each crop book is going to have over 6,000 chapters, right? And those chapters are unique combinations of soil and climate. And within each of those chapters, we're going to have those 400 plus scenarios, those 400 pages, right? And so at the end of the day, what that means is we're talking about, well over 2 million unique data points with respect to climate, soil management per crop. And so the library will be very vast in that way. And so there should be a model run for any sort of NMP report that comes down the line. Now that said, in future years, if there's something, if the library is missing something in terms of, you know, a new crop or in terms of a new management scenario that we just haven't really captured, it's very easy for us to add that to the library, to augment the library, to simulate more pages, if you will, or to create new books, if you will. That's all well within reason. Initially, we're positioned to represent and model what has been reported over the past 3 years in INMP data, or I should say from 2016 to 2018. That's the data sets we're using to build out our crop management matrix.
Certainly, that addresses the crop uptake, but we know that these fields are not heterogeneous insofar as soils are concerned. There's sand streaks through them. Within a fairly short distance, you can change soil type considerably, and each of those has, as you well know, has their unique infiltration rates.
Mm-hmm.
How do you account for that in all of this? That adds, of course, to the complexity, but.
Sure. No, well, that's, I mean, I'm a
before Ken answers that, Dr. Longley, I want to interject just real quick. And Ken will be able to address that question as we go forward and we talk about then how we do the calculation of the values. But first, I do want to make sure the other board members understand before we leave this issue. And why we say crop, we even distinguish between, you know, raisin grapes versus table grapes versus wine grapes would all be their own crop in their own book, right? So we are going to at a variety level as well and could go further with this type of an approach. So I just also want to make sure that's clear because that is a question that sometimes comes up.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tess. And so to address the soils question, you know, as a soil scientist, I certainly appreciate the value of having detailed soil information and understand the effects of soil on any given system, including an ag system. And so what we did when we were setting up the CV SWAP model is we worked with National Resources Conservation Service and their team of soil scientists and digital soil scientists to basically procure the most detailed soil database that they were able to generate, right? And so across the landscape, we have mapping units, soil mapping units that are discrete, you know, delineated soil areas that have been developed over the past 100 years by the NRCS. And so we have those soils delineated. And then it's really a question of, you know, what are the characteristics within those mapping units? And so the soil database that we're using from NRCS, the PEDON data set, really takes, it takes PEDON descriptions. And so what PEDONs are unique soil units that are characterized. You know, folks go out, dig holes, characterize those soils. What NRCS has done is instead of aggregating and simplifying, they've tried to kind of retain all of that, all of those nuanced details, all the information on a layer by layer, horizon by horizon basis. And so with that respect, we've taken the care to try to characterize as best as possible the soil information with the best data that are available. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and so and you know, for those that are not soil scientists like Ken and you, Dr. Longley, a couple of things to note is the root zone library reflects however many different soil types, right? So each crop is run with every soil type that exists. And then as we go into the computation of the values, there's a GIS overlay in order when we get to the township level with this PEDON data set that Ken is talking about that is utilized to then get actual soil type for that parcel of land through a GIS layer to calculate the township values, which then takes into that site-specific soil type in step 3 of the process. So it's part of our model runs here to build the library, and then we use it as part of step 3 when we go into the GIS overlay to then actually determine what is that estimated leaching on a township basis.
Yeah, I think that tees it up nicely to kind of walk through the step 3, and hopefully this will help explain the workflow a little bit. But ultimately, we're referring to this step using the township value calculator, right? So what does this query really look like? How do we build the township values, right? And so we've gone through steps 1 and 2. We've collected data. and we've simulated SWAT many, many times, and we have the root zone library developed. And now it comes time to matching INP data to entries in the root zone library, right? And so the first step would be considering our inputs to this query, right? And so the inputs in this case are the INP reported data. And so with those reports, we have information on the APN number. We know the crop grown, we know the N applied, and we know the yield, right? And so as Tess mentioned, kind of ahead of time, we can take spatial parcel data and relate that to soils and climate information. So we know for every single parcel, we know what soils are in that parcel, we know where that parcel is, so what climatic regime it is under. And so when we actually go to the root zone library and we begin, and recall this is for one parcel within the township that we're doing this right now, the first question of the query would be, you know, what is the crop reported, right? So which book are we going to look in the library? And so in this case, tomato. And then the next question would be, you know, what chapter within that book do we need to start looking for the best entry? And so that's a function of, you know, where is this parcel, right? So we have to know what climate, so what climate regime, and we have to know what soils are within that parcel. And so for this fictitious example, we're saying that there are 3 soil types within this parcel with the relative proportions stated as such. And so what that means from a matching standpoint, from a querying standpoint for this parcel, because there are 3 soils, we're going to have to grab 3 answers from the library, right? And so for tomato in climate X in soil A, you know, of those 400 some odd pages, which page matches most closely to the N applied that was reported, and which page matches most closely to the yield that was reported. And so in that way, we're also matching as closely as possible to the nitrogen balance, right? And that is left behind and potentially subject to leaching and other fates. And so that's really the basis there. And so now we have 3 answers for this parcel. The way to get that up to the parcel level is to area weight it. So basically take the relative proportions of those soils and average based on the soil percentage, the resulting N load and concentration. I may have said that kind of confusing, but we're basically averaging those 3 entries based on the area up to the parcel level. And as we're doing this, we can kind of track our performance, right? Our goodness of fit as we're describing it. And so quite literally looking at, you know, what is the residual? What is the difference between what was applied, what nitrogen was applied in SWAT versus what was reported? What is that difference? And we want it to be really a really small difference. And the same thing with yield, you know, what is that residual? And again, we want to be as close as possible, and therefore also being as close as possible with that nitrogen balance. And so at the parcel level, we've pulled out 3 entries for this one parcel. And once all of that is queried, you know, this parcel's information will get folded in or aggregated up to the actual township, right? And so the exercise is going through every single parcel within that township. Again, through a GIS operation, we'll know what parcels are in what township.
Right. I appreciate your description, and any soil can be characterized this way. You see that in some of the data you can get out of Google Maps. But
yeah,
what I'm talking about is that 500 foot wide sand strip that's going through an area that is predominantly clay and loam. And I presume that all of this data is referenced in some sort of a coordinate system, georeferenced in a coordinate system of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
So does that allow you to get this down to a 250 acres? You're wondering about their impact of their nutrient application processes, and they've got this mixture of soils. Are you able to get down to that kind of a level, differentiate between a gross change in soil type?
Sure. And so the data that we're using are essentially the same data that you see on Google Maps with soil web module, it's the same delineation. So it's the same mapping unit. So the level of granularity you see in those mapping units, those polygons, we're using the same exact polygons. Right?
Okay, so when you run this down to the township calc, you include the variation of soil types from point to point within the township.
Precisely. So we're capturing, we're essentially pulling out data from the library. So to step back, like I said, we're trying to model every situation under the sun, right?
When you talk about parcel, how big is a parcel in your definition?
Sure. It varies, but you could say 40 or 80 acres is a typical parcel size.
Okay.
Could be
So
100.
and I think we need, so these are as reported in the INMP program, the growers report the APN, right? So the assessor parcel number. Mm-hmm. So, and then what Ken, I think, is trying to convey is that, then we take that assessor parcel number and we overlay it on the landscape, and within the assessor parcel, depending upon the size, there can be numerous different soil types and polygons, and this allows us to actually pull out on a polygon basis all the different soil types that are within that assessor's parcel. Is that correct, Ken?
That's exactly it. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's kind of one of the benefits to this approach is that we're ultimately reporting at the township level, but that aggregated value is really a function of a much more discrete calculation that is then rolled up. So we're really going down to the sub parcel level for all the parcels within the township and rolling that up. And so that higher level estimate is really based on more detail, giving some confidence there.
I have a question on the climate
Sure.
input. Does the model accommodate changes in climate as they're typical in California? Like if you had 7 years of drought, how does that affect the model? Or if we had 3 very wet winters, for instance?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's something I didn't describe up front, but I'm happy to talk about now. And so with respect to climate, we're using real data. So we've pulled out, I believe it's dating back to 1985 where available, up to current, from all the CIMA stations within the Central Valley, right? And so we have that actual climatic record from real data to feed into the SWAT model. And when you set up SWAT, basically, as you're going through that process, it'll create what are called subbasins. And so within those subbasins, it'll take climatic information from the closest CIMA station. And so as you move through the valley, you're basically getting real climate data from the closest CIMA station to actually simulate in the model. And so all the variability that's been observed over the past 30 years is being captured within our model simulation. So we have wet years, we have dry years, we have that string of drought years. All of that is actually being modeled in SWAT as we run it.
Thank you.
Can this model be used to forecast? In other words, increase in temperature, changes in climate?
I do know it has the ability. I know people have used it for understanding, things like elevated carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. Right. It does have that functionality. That's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse in terms of using the model, so I wouldn't be able to comment too much beyond that. But I do know I do know it does consider things like concentrations of CO2. Most certainly, the crop models are sensitive to solar radiation, and most certainly soil processes are also affected by not only moisture content but also temperature. So things like mineralization of nitrogen from organic, that's affected by soil temperature.
Well, as you describe it, it's a pretty powerful model.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. I can nerd on it for sure.
How do you run the model per parcel, for instance, or per township when you aggregate it?
Right. So ultimately, as we've described, the workflow kind of entails it really entails building the library, irrespective of any parcel anywhere, right? Like what we're trying to do is simulate every possible combination of crop, climate, and soil, and then fold it in the management scenario from the INMP data, right? And so basically our goal is to do the vast majority of the modeling up front. And as I think I'd said earlier, somewhere, we don't know exactly, but we're certainly assuming more than 40,000 simulations of the model across that 30-year time frame, and building that library. And then it's really just a function of, at that point we're just matching. And so it really just depends, if, how many, unique model runs are required to match all the different variability in the township. That's just whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I like to reckon it as granimals, right? We've got the huge library, and then we're matching from the library to the specific INMP data within that township. So right. It is, kind of building the township from the library.
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
Ken, I don't recall, do we have any more slides after this one, or?
I do believe that's what we have prepared.
Okay.
In terms of background and workflow discussion.
So hopefully, and maybe I could just, kind of put this back into context of where we started. So, we needed to come forward and put forward a formula for consideration of how we would compute groundwater protection values. And what we have put forward in the work plan is the use of this model approach as the formula itself. And then, as you saw from the township calculator, this is how we would then use it to compute those township values. So that is what the proposal is. And it provides that estimate of estimated leaching at a root zone level. We have shared this approach, obviously with your staff, environmental justice community, as well as Dr. Harder and folks at the UC as well. And, we think it's considering the amount of work that needs to go into determining that what's actually happening. We thought this was a pretty unique, novel approach that helped to answer a lot of questions as to how we incorporate a lot of information in a way that is doable. And perfectly expect that it will evolve over time as well.
So, Tess, have the growers been getting briefings or presentations on this?
We have presented this to the leads at the commodity organizations. So we have shared it with our sister trade organizations, as well as Farm Bureau, Western Growers, commodity groups. So we have been going out and about and putting it forward as what we are proposing. We are, we have not started into step 2, which is the really expensive part of doing all the root zone library, until we understand if the regional board is going to approve this as our formula. So we, we're doing as much in advance as we can without having something with stranded cost, depending and wanting to know which direction the water board staff or your executive officer would go with approval or not. So kind of been waiting for that. So then we can, once we, assuming we got approval from the water board, not saying that we will or not, leave that decision up to your folks, but assuming that we did, we would then start very quickly going into developing of the root zone library, additional crop calibration for crops that have not had the same level of calibration as others, and then also have a process. We have a very tight schedule for how we would get to submitting values for all of the high vulnerability townships within a 6-month period. So we have, from approval, we have 6 months to then hand into the water board for review those computed township values.
Okay, very good. As a water board member, I commend you on that. But separate from water board, when you start doing webinars, I appreciate you contact my university because I think this could inspire some additional research.
Absolutely.
Very good. Is that the end of your presentation?
That is the end of our presentation, and here to answer any questions that folks may have.
Board members, any further questions?
I don't have any questions. I mean, it feels like an exciting system. Modeling is always exciting and complex.
And expensive. So, it's expensive.
I know. And I know it's expensive. And, it's just a, sort of tightly packaged best guess based on all these factors. So I understand the hesitation from the other side, but it does sound like anything that has the potential of being controlled or accounted for has been sort of thought and accounted for. So it seems exciting and promising, but I know that it's, not without its concerns.
And Carmen, I believe you were on the call with me the other day when we were being briefed on this, and my concern was, do we have ways to really check the data out and maybe in a gross sort of way? Staff assures me that we do. So that gives me more confidence because particularly with complex models, it's oftentimes difficult to tell if what you're getting out is in fact what you will actually come out of the real world system. So yeah, I think you guys done a great job. I'll keep being somewhat cautious. Thank you for the word. Somewhat cautious in what you're telling us, because that's my job, not only as a board member, but as an academic. And so, yeah, let's get on with it.
Could I ask, maybe when you say let's get on with it, what is the process moving forward? I guess
that's a good point. And I think staff can best tell us what that is. Eric?
Sure. So, as we said earlier, the document's still under staff review. I think there's a couple issues that we probably want to engage them a little bit more on. There's probably some additional work that'll need to happen between now and calculation of those groundwater protection values. So yeah, there's still some internal discussion as far as whether we move forward with an approval, but that timeline should be fairly soon.
Great. Well, I'd like to be kept abreast of what's going on, and given the questions Mark was asking, I'm being somewhat presumptuous here, I realize, but I think he probably would like to also. Any other board member who has interest in following this closely certainly is welcome. Any further discussion from board members or staff or executive officer?
Thank you, guys. That was a great presentation on a really complex model and subject. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd like to come in. It was a great presentation. It was easy to follow and a great model. We just have to see how it all pans out, but I think it was a great presentation and I was able to follow it, and that is a great thing. Thank you both.
You've learned a lot on this board, all of the terminology. It's amazing. You need a PhD. We need to give you a PhD when you leave, Denise.
Absolutely. I think you guys did a wonderful job. A lot of hard work went into it, and modeling is by no means an easy thing to do. Again, great job.
Nor as they pointed out, nor cheap. It's expensive.
Yeah, and I think that the use of the diagrams were really helpful and the way that it was laid out sort of linearly really kind of helped me follow, because there are some places, because science isn't my strong point either, where I'm just like, wait, what happened? And I can just go back and look. So that was helpful. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that wraps us up on this item. Before we go,
there's a number of commenters.
Did you have something to say?
Dr. Longley?
Yes.
We have 3 people who would like to speak on this item.
Okay, great.
And the first one is Michael Claiborne from the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Good afternoon, Chair Longley, and to the board. I'll start by thanking regional board staff, the agricultural coalitions, and the experts who have walked us through the SWAP model and how it could be used as part of the groundwater quality protection target program. That was really helpful. We had a prior meeting with the coalitions, and we've met with a couple of experts to try to better understand this model, which is very complex. Looks like it has some promise to it, but it was helpful to walk through it. It's important to remember the purpose of the groundwater quality protection target program in evaluating the proposed formula. Specifically, Leadership Council works with residents of disadvantaged communities and communities of color that are impacted by nitrate pollution. We're engaged in the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program to protect and restore access to drinking water for the residents that we work alongside. And this formula is a part of that. So it's important to keep that context in mind. It's exciting for me personally to see the groundwater quality protection target program move forward. As has been noted, we were involved in the discussions that led to the inclusion of the groundwater quality protection formula in the East San Joaquin order and now the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. And we believe there is a lot of potential to improve and protect groundwater quality if protective township level nitrate loading targets are established and implemented. As noted in our written comments, we're generally supportive of the use of the SWAP model in developing groundwater quality protection targets. We did, however, raise 3 areas of concern in our written comments. The first is the need to continuously improve calibration of the model. The second is the need for more explanation regarding the process for use of the model and development of the values and targets. And the third is how local impacts within a township will be identified and mitigated. I'll speak to that first item, and then my understanding is Jennifer Clary and Debbie Orris will speak to the other 2. We agree with staff that more work is needed to calibrate the model to conditions and facts on the ground. The calibration work must be ongoing as studies and monitoring work is completed and must be included in the groundwater quality protection target work plan. The work plan itself must include explicit information about how the model will be steadily improved, including through the development of field data to confirm model outputs. We'd also like an understanding of how this work plan will continue to beyond the 2024 completion of the MPEP, since the order requires targets to be updated every 5 years. In short and in summary, the proposed approach looks promising, but the model needs to be continuously improved to ensure that it produces accurate values and can form the basis for strong targets that are protective of groundwater quality and sources of drinking water. We look forward to continuing to work with board staff and stakeholders to improve the model and develop groundwater quality protection targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I certainly concur with your calibration. Continue recalibration of the model. And for models to be useful, I think your comments in a more generic sense have real application, regardless of what the model is modeling. Any other questions for? Okay.
We have another speaker, Debbie Orris, representing the Community Water Center.
Okay, Debbie.
Good afternoon, Chair and Board. I want to first, my name is Debbie Orris with Community Water Center. I'll first echo the comments of my colleague, Mike Claiborne. Thanking staff and the coalition for the work that they've done on this groundwater protection formula. Previous meetings have been very useful, especially, I am not a technical person, and it's been really useful to see these presentations describe in detail what is planned here. As Mike mentioned, we were involved, our groups were involved in the helping kind of devise these this requirement. The goal is to protect drinking water sources from nitrate contamination. So in that regard, one of our comments within our letter was, how are local impacts within a township going to be both identified and mitigated should they occur? While a township is much smaller than a basin or even coalition, you can still have disproportionate impacts and hotspots within the township area that result in very high levels of nitrate within, in particular, shallow domestic wells. But in general, having impacts upon drinking water sources. So we would like to see, this formula along with Thomas Harder's groundwater model that's currently under development to be used collaboratively to identify potential hotspots within the townships. And then moving forward in this process, when the targets are being developed, we hope that the regional board continues to focus upon the identification of potential hotspots and vulnerable communities in order to protect drinking water users from undue harm, because that really needs to be the focus. That is one of the focuses of the Irrigated Lands Order in general, and in particular these groundwater protection targets that will eventually be developed. So that's the close of my comments. Thank you again to everybody who's been engaged in the creation of this formula and the eventual targets.
Thank you, Debbie. And I think you could tell by my questions, I'm also concerned about the hotspots. And that's something we certainly will be looking at. Any further questions or comments for Debbie?
Our next commenter is Jennifer Clary, speaking on behalf of Clean Water Action.
Very good. Hello, Jennifer.
Good morning, Chair Longley and board members. How are you doing today?
Oh,
good, thank you.
Doing fine, thank you.
Great. Well, I'm speaking on behalf of Clean Water Action and as one of the three organizations that sat at the table with the Ag Coalitions. And I think we had a very productive, if rushed, bargaining sessions. And so what we were looking at with the groundwater protection formula was to really develop a shared understanding of what compliance looks like. Because I don't know if you've read the Irrigated Lands Order, but it's really not very, there's a lot of language, but it's not really clear, like this is good and this is legal and this is not legal. So we wanted to develop that. And I think the concern I have is I appreciate you're now clarifying that this is a root zone model, because the real question I have is I had thought that the groundwater protection formula was going to carry us to first encounter groundwater, which is the point of compliance in the order. And so what we have, though, is this beautiful model, which admittedly needs calibration, but a beautiful model. And then we're going to have what between the root zone and first encounter groundwater? And I'm concerned that it's not going to have, that's an area where you have a lot more uncertainty than you do with the SWOT model. There's a lot less data, there's a lot more guessing, and I'm really concerned that we're going to have a beautiful root zone value and that we're not going to have sufficient data, science, or affirmation of what happens between the root zone, the groundwater model. So that's a gap. So do we want to change the point of compliance, which is what we suggested in our letter, or how do we ensure that everyone's on board with that there's sufficient transparency in how that's calculated, that there's sufficient data, or that if we do have uncertainty, how that uncertainty is going to be captured in the process of developing these targets. And I do want to say I appreciate the vast amount of work that's been done and appreciate the collegial nature of the relationship with the coalitions that's gotten us this far, and look forward to continuing to work with them moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions or comments for Jennifer?
It's not specifically for Jennifer, but certainly with Debbie and the gentleman, Claiborne.
Michael Claiborne?
Yeah, their engagement in this, to me, gives it a lot more credibility and balance. So I know that the presentation, was done by the coalitions, but the engagement of environmental justice really kind of brings this together. So I just want both sides to know that by working together, it gives me as a board member confidence in helping move this forward. So it's not always easy, but I'm really glad to see that. So thank you.
And Debbie, as one board member, I'd have to be convinced that the point of compliance should not be first encountered groundwater. In many instances, we have a significant volume in the Evado zone between the root zone and first encountered groundwater. What goes on there is of interest also. So, for one, it takes a pretty hard convincing to convince me to vote on moving it from first encountered groundwater to the root zone. But I think your comments are very valid and certainly have to be kept in mind as we move forward to develop this model and integrate it into the work that the regional board does. We're blazing new ground in a lot of this. It hasn't been done elsewhere. And we have tools that maybe are sharp, but not sharp enough, and we have to continue working on them to make them sharper. But they are tools, and we have to look at improving them, and where possible, develop new tools. And it's an ongoing process. It's not something that happens overnight. And until you get out there and really do it, you really don't know all of the problems that you're going to encounter. So that's one board member's point of view. So with that said, are there any other comments?
Dr. Longley, you might ask for a show of hands. Someone indicated they may want to comment.
Okay. If I could have a show of hands on your Zoom page at the bottom there's an opportunity, or if you're on a telephone, *9. We'll give a few seconds to see if there's anybody else wanting to talk. David Corey wants to talk.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, David.
Yeah, okay. Chair Longley, members of the board, David Corey. I'm going to start with, I miss seeing you all in person. It's probably the most important thing I have to say right now is that it's just, as much as I like, informed by hearing the whole presentation, I really miss seeing everybody in person, board members and staff, and I hope we get to be there soon because we lose something without having that personal connection and personal interaction. So that's my primary comment, but I will sort of address sort of the most substantive issues as well. I do want to acknowledge and appreciate everyone's acknowledgement of the complexity of the task that was assigned to us in coming up with nitrogen leaching estimates. It is a enormous task. I think that we've come up with a process that is as accurate as it possibly can be, given the difficulty of it. As Ken and Tess have said, this can evolve over time, and I think I'm really excited about what we're proposing here. The other thing, as far as what Jennifer had talked about and bringing up what happens below the root zone, we certainly are going to look beyond just the root zone and look at what happens in the Vado zone and what happens in the aquifer itself, that will definitely be addressed. To the extent and how we're going to address it is going to need to go back to the regional board executive officer for their approval, and we'll have continued discussions with the environmental justice community, and I assume with the board as well, to articulate and figure out how do we deal with those issues. When I look at this, I look at it in three segments, and we looked at this in one of the earlier slides. There's sort of the root zone, which is a very important process, and that's what SWAT looks at. But then there's that area between the bottom of the root zone and the aquifer, and then there's the aquifer itself. I divide it into those three zones. We have to account for what happens with nitrogen in all three of those zones. I think we intend to do that in a thoughtful and meaningful way to really be able to understand what are the impacts to water quality. That's my goal, and I think that's what we intend to do.
And your description of those three zones, I think, is proper.
Yeah. So we haven't, that's going to be, we're going to deal with that moving forward. Again, as Tess said, whether that is within generation of the values or whether it's appropriate to be in the development of the targets itself, we really haven't quite figured out the best fit for that. We're working through that, and we'll have further discussions.
Very good. Thank you. Any comments for David? David, it's good to see you.
Yeah, that we miss seeing David too.
Yeah, we miss seeing David too. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen. Very good. Any further comments? And I'll take our staff comments if there's nobody else wanting to talk.
Yeah, I just briefly want to commend the coalition. I mean, this coalition has dealt with a lot of issues, but what I'm always amazed about is how the coalition comes together. They receive the input from the representatives of the disadvantaged communities, the environmental justice groups, and somewhere in all of that, those ideas come forth. It's not anything that everybody is satisfied with, but I am very commendable of the coalition and their efforts to work jointly to try to find a resolution that's beneficial to everyone that's involved, and particularly the communities that are impacted. They do a magnificent job in trying to address those issues, and I don't want to take that lightly. I think it's very important, and that's why the coalitions were formed, and that they be functional and do good due diligence, and I think that's what's happening. So thank you. And of course, I want to thank the environmental justice community for the work they do to represent the disadvantaged communities.
Thank you, Denise. Any further comments by board members? Hearing none, seeing none, go back to staff. Sue, are you the designated staff person to talk to us on this? I see you're up here.
I was just here to answer questions if you had any. And I guess the only thing I would add is that development of the targets is also really important to us, right? And I just want to mention the timelines for that. Sure. Eric mentioned that, coalitions have 6 months after approval of the groundwater protection formula to develop the groundwater protection values, right? And then it's a year after that the targets will be developed. And that's really what gets to the groundwater quality, right? And additional work will be needed to link up the nitrogen loading to the groundwater quality. And so, folks have mentioned Thomas Harder's model. I think that's, one of the options that they're looking at for linking that up. That is absolutely an important issue. Staff does plan on bringing the groundwater protection target development process back to the board for discussion prior to approval, just so you'll have ample opportunity to comment on that at a later date. But that's really the only thing I had. I'm just here to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Any board members have questions for Sue? Well, thank you very much, and I thank everybody for their comments on this item. It's exciting work. It's important work. As I pointed out, this is a tool, but it's a very important tool as we moved down the road on setting targets. That's critical work. It's important that we do the very, very best we can, and I'm certain we will. Thank Kenneth. Thank you for your presentation, as I also thank everybody else who presented today. With that, we will move on to the next item. The board is slated to go into executive session. We got 2 items left. Strategic planning. How long are we slated on that?
Presentation itself is probably a little over a half hour.
And the Hanover properties, we don't know. Is that correct?
We don't at the time, at the current juncture. I don't
Okay.
know. If
Best we go into executive session, and I'm going to allow 5 minutes for a quick break, and then that's probably going to take us about 40 minutes by my calculations with the information I've gotten. And then another 30 minutes for the folks to get something to eat. 40 minutes, 30 minutes. Yeah. So we should be back in session by 2 o'clock by my calculations. Is that right? 30 and 40 is 110. No. Let's try to get back in session by 1:30. That's about an hour. Actually, that only gives you about 20 minutes for lunch. Board members, is 20 minutes for lunch enough for you?
It depends on whether or not my husband made anything for me. So.
Well, kind of my situation too.
I'm okay with 20 minutes.
Yeah, so let's try to come back in as I do my calculations. They're not as fast as they should be. Let's try to come back at 1:45 for agenda item 10.
Okay, but Dr. Long, before we go, so we have 20 minutes for lunch, and then when will we start our closed session?
Well, we're going to do our closed session first.
Okay, so we're going to do that now.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, and Patrick, how are we going to do closed session? Do I have a separate link?
There should be a separate link sent to you.
Okay.
Yes,
Right.
it was an appointment that I sent to all the board members this morning to their water board's account.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jessica.
Good. We will see you then, and I'll go ahead and leave now.
Hold on, I just need to announce closed session.
Okay. Make your announcement.
We're going to be discussing under the closed session list items G, which is the Sandridge Partners litigation, items L, which is Orland Sand and Gravel, and then personnel under Government Code 11126 Subdivision A.
Thank you very much. We shall see you on the other side in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Is there any board member that does not have the meeting appointment with the closed session link?
Yes, that would be me.
I'm checking now for myself, Denise.
I'm just checking.
Could you possibly email it to forward it to my Gmail account?
Done. I've done that for you, Raji. Is there anyone else that did not get it?